So we are basically talking about a kind of like comprehensive operation that includes both ground operation as well as airstrike. So it was launched by the government forces in Musa Qala district of Helmand, where the government announced that they have killed 22 insurgents, including some Al-Qaeda members, and have arrested around over a dozen members of Al-Qaeda, including some women. So the figures about the civilian casualties are conflicting. As we spoke to the governor office in Helmand, they said 14 insurgents have been killed, but they have no clue how many of the civilians have lost their lives, because we have two factors that cause civilian casualties, according to the sources I spoke earlier, which is part of the civilians who were based around the so-called hideout that was targeted by the government forces. They were affected of the airstrike as well as the ground operation, and the other part is the civilians that they were moving from one village to another conflict zone, which was in Musa Qala. So they were moving from one village to the other, and they were also raided by the government forces. So we still are not sure about the figures of the civilian casualty, but the Ministry of Defense saying that they are investigating the civilian casualties, and the local governor office also admits the civilian loss, and not giving a specific figure, but also saying that they are also investigating, because that location has been under the Taliban control since many years, and the government has changed the strategy to go more after the hideouts and warehouses of the insurgents to strike, harsh, and to conduct more like intensified operations against the Taliban hideouts. And we have heard from the Taliban that they are saying that dozens of civilians have lost their lives. What we heard from the local officials, they are saying that up to 40 civilians have lost their lives, including children and women.
Okay. Sultan, when the Taliban kills civilians, they usually claim responsibility nonetheless as a sort of victory. However, when the government does it, they acknowledge that these were unintended casualties, that they were hit usually by accident. Tell me, does that make a difference to the Afghan people? Are they more forgiving of government-inflicted casualties?
Well, this is the main point, that the Afghan people have been suffering since, over 18 years of war in the country, because they have been paying the bill and they have been suffering these huge losses. Because when the Taliban, hide in civilian houses and the government goes after them, then that causes civilian casualties. This is what the government claims. And on the other side, when the Taliban, go to the cities and commit suicide attacks, or target government or public institutions, and then they say their target was specific, but it happens, so that's that's not what it looks like. So both sides are trying to say that, look, we are not after civilian casualties, but also we are after trying to avoid civilian casualties, because they have been their attacks have been condemned in several layers of local and international, let's say, community. But that is something that showing a very increasing level of the violence in the country, which is kind of, let's say, from the Taliban side, they are saying, it's because of the U.S. resistance not accepting the peace talks, and that's why they are responsible for the consequences of these, deadly attacks. So, we had Taliban representatives in China, saying that they are still in the same position, which is the political solution, that the U.S. Should resume the talks. And today we had another bunch of, another meeting here in Kabul that many politicians, including former President Karzai, were participating and talking about the peace talks and prioritizing the peace talks other than the elections, and calling about the resumption of the peace talks. So we have to wait and see what will happen next. because Zalmay Khalilzad met with the Pakistan Prime Minister yesterday in New York, and it looks like the U.S. may take a step forward to resume the peace talks, but it's not clear when it will happen. That's something that has, followed by some really serious concerns, because the operations from the both sides, from the government and from the Taliban, has intensified dramatically and causing lots of civilian deaths.
Okay.